purposeful pain versus pointless pain. And we see pointless pain all the time.
We get all this debate around the importance of life and everything else. And even though Emma lived 21 minutes, she touched a lot of people.
That's what I told her when I was holding her. You know,
Yeah.
I just told her that a lot of people loved her.
Brooke Martin, I'm thankful for your time. This is great to make your acquaintance.
Oh, it's so good to be with you, Jason. Thanks for having me on.
Well, I don't normally get to speak with Emmy Award winners, so you know.
Don't let that fool you.
I was at a conference and somebody on stage in this panel, and the guy hosting goes, "Do you know you're one of the top 10 recovery podcasts in the world?" And I went, "I'll be darned. All right."
Me? Yeah,
Yeah,
cool.
it's like okay.
Right.
Uh, but we're gonna dig into why you wrote your book, your story, and I really feel extra honored to be able to start here as we unravel what you, your husband, and family went through with gratitude. I mean, that no matter what we go through, we can find it. So, three things you're grateful for today.
Oh, I'm grateful for Jesus. I am grateful for my family. And I'm grateful for fall. I love this season. I'm in Indiana and the leaves are falling and there's a chill in the air and pumpkin spice everything. I love it.
I'm with you on that. And ironically, this is a decaf pumpkin spice coffee.
No
So
way. There you go.
there you go.
We're
Uh,
vibing already.
yeah. And my brother lives in Indiana now.
Oh,
So
really?
yeah,
Cool.
Indianapolis, just outside Indianapolis.
Yeah, that's where we are.
I'll be darned. Well, never know. Well, maybe we'll break bread in person
Would love
sometime.
that. Would love that, man.
I'm really appreciative that you were able to be able to look at that so easy. As you know, your book that we're going to discuss, but I mean, you went through such a hardship. You found out when you were pregnant that your daughter wasn't going to be able to survive very long, and as you shared with me, it was 21 minutes. After she was born, that she passed. And my immediate thing is, how did that grieving process start for you? So many people. I've talked to numerous people who reach out, thank you, I lost a child to addiction or whatever it is. And that's always the thing is I don't know how to grieve.
Mm, yeah. So our grieving process was kind of different because it started at her diagnosis at
Mhm.
14 weeks. So I'm a news anchor at the time, evening news anchor in Indy. We had a 2-year-old son, and we find out we're pregnant with our second child. We make the announcement on air, and everything is kind of going along smoothly. Life is like shiny and bright. And at 14 weeks, I had a bad cold, went into my OB on the way into work to get a Z pack. And before I left, she was just like, "Do you want to sneak in and see the baby?" And I was like, "Of course." And so I was actually alone when the discovery was made. And I was in the ultrasound room. The tech kind of kept printing off pictures and leaving and coming back and like mumbling about the machine not working. And I didn't think anything of it. As a journalist, I should have, but didn't see it coming. And and the next thing I know, the nurse practitioner walked in and she just put her hand on my arm and she just said, "Your baby's skull isn't developing. I'm so sorry."
Mm.
And left. And so I'm alone and tears are just like flooding my face. And all of a sudden I just hear this like what I would describe as a whisper, but like super clear whisper of just Emmanuel, Emmanuel, Emmanuel. And to be totally honest with you, I'm like confused. I'm like, why am I hearing a Christmas term? Like I could not put it
Yeah.
together. And my doctor came in and he said it is, what we think it's anencephaly, which is 0% chance of survival. Um, and so we didn't know anything that day. My husband rushed to the office, and we were determined to carry her. But it wasn't until we got home that we realized that she would likely survive full term, and we might even have some time with her. Over 85% of these cases are terminated. And so there was a ton of confusion about why we would choose to carry, why, how we're going on like this. And because I continued to anchor the news. And so your question is about grieving. And I kind of had to set the stage because my grieving started that day, even though our daughter was alive. We just knew it was coming. And so for 6 months, I continued to anchor the news every night. My belly was growing. I felt her moving. The thing with anencephaly is it's just like the skull doesn't fully form at the end of development, but everything else is perfectly healthy. And so it's gut-wrenching. It's heartbreaking. And the journey of my pregnancy was surreal, with really the world watching the whole time.
Yeah. And how did you handle, I mean, I understand I did 20 years of radio. I remember announcing both times, hey, I'm going to be a father, and, that kind of thing. But then with this type of situation where, I know how it is. When I was growing up, I had Dina Ruiz, who eventually married Clint Eastwood, where I grew up, did the news there, and met her several times in person. Beautiful person. So I couldn't imagine, these people that they feel like they know you and you've shared your heart with them, and then to share this news. Was it a tough decision to do so? I mean, I couldn't imagine that in a public setting, because essentially you're a public persona and personality, and people appreciate when you share your joys.
Yeah, it is like a family. I mean, viewers become like family. And so we did have a choice to make. It was like we could either walk through the rest of my pregnancy and act like everything's fine, but I mean, that felt like hell to me, right? Like, who wants to pretend that every day? Because we had already announced that I was pregnant. And so we really only had one choice. And actually, the station had planned that I would do a write-up on it. And a photographer from the station was going to come over and take some pictures to go with a blog. And I woke up early that morning with this distinct thought that now is the time to be vulnerable and transparent, and that writing and taking pictures would give me the opportunity to kind of I don't know, put a facade on this thing. Sure. When really it's just ugly, and it's horrible, and it's gut-wrenching. And so I shot off a text to the photographer. I said, hey, if you get this in time, will you just bring a video camera? And he came over, and I said, set up the tripod and just press record. My husband and I hadn't planned a thing that we were going to say. We just sat on our couch and wept and shared the news. And it was actually that video that ended up going global, because people were struck by it, by the authenticity of it. And it's really what caused so many people to start leaning in really close to our story the rest of the time. And that set the stage for us, of authenticity. Because as a news anchor, your whole career is spent kind of being perfect, being what everyone wants you to be, consultants, viewers, all this stuff. And you build up this image that you have to protect. And this was the first time that I was no, I'm not leading with that anymore. And it was powerful for me personally. And honestly, I think it's what allowed our story to really go forth. And we ended up naming our daughter Emma Noelle after that name that I heard, Emmanuel, because it means God is with us. And my husband and I had different, degrees of faith at that point, but we were really certain that God was sending a message. And we kind of thought it was a message for everyone else, right? God is with us. But what we really didn't realize was the message was profoundly for us personally, because it changed us forever.
Yeah. Oh, I got chills. I am.
Knockin' Doors Down by Carlos Vieira, now available wherever you get audiobooks.
I wasn't done partying, and I didn't want the binge to end. I think I knew that when I finally got home, I'd have to face what I had done, and I wasn't ready to do that. Being responsible for my actions wasn't something I was looking forward to. I had abandoned my wife and baby, my family, and my business. I wanted to avoid the shame of returning to what I had left behind. Even though I was not yet going home, I wasn't sure I had enough resources to continue the binge.
Click the link in the podcast description to find out more. The We're Out of Time podcast with Richard Taite, featuring two-time NBA champion Lamar Odom.
You were in a coma, right?
For 3 days. They told me I wasn't even going to talk again, let alone walk.
Musician and social media influencer Andrea Russett.
Oh, God.
As of today, 2 weeks.
Star of Netflix Tall Girl Ava Michelle.
The next morning, I found him and
You found him?
I did find him.
Personal stylist Parker Noriega.
These kind of doctors, majority of the time, are yes doctors.
Ken Kraft, the founder of Hope the Mission.
I had my own broken world experience. I lost everything.
On the We're Out of Time podcast with the man who revolutionized addiction treatment, Richard Taite. Subscribe now on Spotify, Apple Podcast, and YouTube, and we'll see you next Tuesday.
Obviously, my journey is so very different, but when people have that kind of a spiritual experience, you end up forever changed by it.
Yeah.
You know, because when you hear it and have it, you're incredibly present. You're attuned to what is going on. It is. I don't know how to put it. You have all of a sudden an awakening of a God consciousness, and you just can't go back. You can't go back to another way. It's. I just commend you for not ignoring that, because, you know, I've seen it with people, the public persona and how it should be. And boy, social media, very rarely do we share our losses and present a certain thing. And I'm really moved by that courageousness and that acknowledgement, or being able to connect to the fact that wasn't coming from you. That was flowing from something greater.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's what we experience time and time and time again throughout the journey. And with the most powerful actually happening 3 days after Emma's death. We had a scheduled C-section, and she was born alive, as you mentioned, and she survived 21 minutes. And she was then able to be in the room with us for my recovery, which was is really amazing. It's thanks to a device called a cuddle cot. If anyone's been through infant loss, they might be familiar with it. But it's like a cooling bassinet that allows the baby to be with you for closure, right? Like, it's a gift of time. You get to take pictures, and your family can hold the baby, and it's beautiful. It's amazing. But I had been through the diagnosis, the pregnancy, the delivery, the death, and still the day that I dreaded most was the day of discharge from the hospital, because I couldn't understand how it's physically possible for a mother to walk out of a hospital and leave your baby behind. It didn't seem possible. It felt like that would physically break me. Like, that would be the end of me. And so I woke up that morning, the third day, and tears were already streaming down my face. And I just cried out to God, and I just said, I can't do this. And I meant it with every being. Like, I felt like my heart was going to physically break. And in that moment, I don't know how to explain it other than to say, like, heaven came down. I felt this surge of strength that started in my toes, and it like shot through my body. And I felt this weight of peace, like, literally fall on top of me as I'm in this bed. And I like catch my breath, and I'm like, and I look over at Emma, and like, I'm like, God is here. Like, God is with me. Like, literally, that this is not a platitude. Like, this is not something we say to make ourselves feel better. Like, literally, he is with me. And my husband and I spent the morning rocking her, and we handed her to a nurse, and we walked out, and we got in our car. And I just remember this moment. We looked at each other and we smiled. And it wasn't like the grief was gone or anything. It was like, we just walked through the fire and we weren't burned. You know what I mean? Like we just like, we're like, we didn't do that. Like we couldn't do that. It was kind of like everything we said we believed. Because sometimes, you grow up with these belief systems and you just adhere to them. And it was like everything we said we believed, we realized was true. Like you said awakening. That's the awakening. That's what can happen in suffering. Is like you walk through the fire and you realize, oh my, like I've always said that death couldn't defeat Jesus and death can't defeat me. Like it's true. And so it unlocked something inside of us that, you said it, you can't go back from it. It formed this insatiable hunger for the things of God because we realized what happened in that hospital room is available to us. It is accessible to us. That power, that presence, it's like we realized we were taking a penny this whole time when God was like offering us the riches of heaven. And so it just changed us. It changed our marriage. It changed our family. It changed us forever. The thing that burdened me though, I got back to work as a news anchor for about 2 years after that. I was in my dream job. I thought I would do it forever. And I couldn't shake though the stories. We heard from thousands of people throughout my pregnancy who were drowning in their own grief and loss and despair, and they couldn't get out of it. And their stories really burdened me. And it got to a point where I felt like I was being nudged out of TV news, and it scared me because it was my dream job and I worked my whole life for it.
Yeah.
And I was driving down the highway one day and I said, God, if you're calling me out of news, can you tell me what you're calling me into? And meanwhile, I'll tell you, I spent, those 2 years, I'm just like devouring scripture and, I'm just learning and taking in so much. And I'm driving down the highway, and this is going to sound crazy. I get it. But I see this vision in my mind, super clear, of a burned out forest. And with it came the words controlled burn. And I was like, okay, this is crazy. Literally, this is crazy. Like, I have no idea, but I knew it was from God. And I just said, like, I'm listening. Nice. And piece by piece, he like downloaded this concept of helping other people walk through life's fires. And it was like, a fire can take one of two divergent paths. It can grow out of control, right? And it can turn into a wildfire. We see it all the time. And those wildfires destroy for generations, addiction, divorce. I mean, you name it. It's horrible things, right? Or God said, if our fires are contained, if they're bordered by his promises and provision and power, life's fires actually have the potential to do something incredible. They can burn away what is holding us back from his presence. And in turn, they can leave behind nutrient-rich soil, which can grow things in us that could have never grown without the fire. And I was like, oh, okay, that's something. Like, I'm asking him, like, what's next, expecting him to be like PR, and he like gives me this vision of this fire. But anyway, it ignited, no pun intended, something inside of me that was like, this is something, like, this can help people, like, reorient their understanding of suffering when it is surrendered. And that's what it comes down to ultimately, is like, it is our choice, right? Like in suffering, it is our choice.
Absolutely. And I, going through, my addiction struggles, seeing it with my father growing up in a home of it. And, we didn't talk about a little before we hit record, he went through sexual abuse, molestation, rape. I had a molestation incident at 5 and all these things, and carrying that hurt and the shame, and that's why to me, your story's so moving, because you were just right out in front of it. I had stunted growth. I never knew how to maturely come about this thing, but once it was put in front of me in this opportunity that ironically pulled me away from a 20-year radio career to do this podcast, we do get those opportunities, and it is like that trial by fire that just comes our way if we are awake to it and what it is. And it's been unraveling for me. It's been a long journey of continual unraveling and meeting new people and a different path on my journey. And, when I started this, somebody told me that I would be present in this conversation with you 5 years ago. I go, no, that's not what I'm focusing on doing. And it's just, we don't know because it's God's plan, not mine. Yeah. I have to just surrender to that will. Yeah. And I mean, what a beautiful perspective. And you and your husband, just, I'm in awe of being able to take that look at that and go, how can we take this pain and give it purpose and help others?
That's it. It's purposeful pain versus pointless pain. And we see pointless pain all the time. It's horrible. And it's like, I think so often when we're met with the fires of life, and like you said, they can come in all different shapes and forms. And, but it's like so often we're either trying to control it by throwing our own buckets of water on it, or we're trying to jump out, right? Like we could have jumped out of ours. Like we could have chosen termination, and people would have understood like that, like many people do. But we would have been jumping out of the fire, and what happens when you jump out of the fire is you're still walking around with painful burns that remind you of that time that you were in the fire instead of being forged. And that's what happens when you stay in the fire is you are forged. Like you are, like, it's like the scriptures talk so much about suffering. And I always kind of took it as like folklore, like, oh yeah, rejoice in your sufferings, right? Like who's gonna, right? Who's gonna do that? And it's not until like you go through it that you're like, oh my gosh, like, no, for real. I'm rejoicing in that. I'm rejoicing in that because it burned away everything that was keeping me from God himself. Like it burned it away. And I don't know that anything else could have done that, Jason. Like, I mean, not everyone has to go through suffering. And don't get me wrong. I'm not saying it's some kind of badge of honor that God likes it, but I'm saying he uses it, you know? And that's like, it's huge. It's just our perspective. We have to understand that we have the choice to walk through the fire with faith. And I think often, I don't know about you, but like we get hung up on these questions, these proof questions, like, is God really good? If he's good, how could he allow it? Right. And they're valid questions, but we have a choice. And it's like, we can either go after proof or we can go after his presence. Mm-hmm. And proof is like a ravenous monster. It never satisfies. Like never, you can't get an answer clear enough that will satisfy you. Yeah. But his presence, his presence is enough. Yeah. His presence is enough. And it's because he's been there. Yeah. He's walked through the suffering. There's a reason God chose for his son to suffer. Yeah. Because he knows. Yeah. And so in suffering, that's what you have to go after. And he's enough.
Yeah. Well, like you said, much like the forest fire, there is, I mean, it's as simple as you can't make an omelet without breaking a few eggs. And I hate to use that in this conversation, but it's true. Just like with the forest, yes, there's all this beautiful stuff in the home for creatures and everything else, and it burns. But in that burn and after that process, like you said, comes a fertile ground. Yeah. Yeah. And that's, I mean, that's even in the promise that we get. If you are of Christian faith, it's way back in Genesis. It says that. Yeah. Go and be prosper, and the trees, the birds, the fish, everything. It's all a part of it, and there is a promise of suffering. I mean, it's just an unavoidable thing
Yeah.
that I know for me it took quite a long time to recognize that I was being put through a trial and, like you said, being forged in a fire to be able to do things. And when I had that first recognition of that, and it wasn't that long ago, maybe a couple of years, I was speaking to a high school classroom and shared my story. And afterwards, a young lady goes, "Boy, how can you talk like you don't even seem upset that you went through what you went through as a little
Wow.
kid?" And I went, "Yeah, it doesn't this body, this vessel, it doesn't trigger any sort of response anymore. There is no trauma response to it anymore."
Wow.
And it took that
Praise
time,
God.
and it sounds like that's what happened with you and your husband. It was a quicker, and I don't mean to compare time, but it's a call to action. It presented an opportunity for a call to action to do work greater than yourself. Like you said,
Yeah.
people were reaching out. It touched people. I'm sure there was numerous families that went through the same thing that were just grateful that they knew they weren't alone.
Oh, yeah. I mean, anyone who has been through infant loss knows it is an incredibly lonely experience, more lonely than any really other kind of death because others don't know how to handle it. Now, for us, we were the exception because, we had an outpouring of support. But for most people, it's like their baby dies. People are scared to ask about it. They don't want to upset the parents. They don't know if the baby had a name. They don't, and so what happens is people kind of just pull away
Hmm.
and you're left to grieve and process and deal alone. Um, I, oh, the stories that I heard from like 80, 90-year-old women who said, there's not a day that hasn't gone by that I haven't thought of my child. And back in the day, if a baby died, they whisked that baby away and you never saw it. It was like, hear no evil, see no evil, nothing happened here. Just horrifying like processes. We've come so far today in how we, are able, the medical community deals with it. But for Emma's memorial, we actually opened it up to the public, to any family of loss, because we heard from so many people who were still just really grieving their babies. And so we set up a website before her memorial and we said, there was a little box, input box, and it said, put your baby's name or just a date if you don't have a name, anything, and they'll be displayed at the memorial. And there was this huge screen at the church we were at that went from the floor to the ceiling of the stage. And Jason, the thing was lit up. I mean, I don't even know how it was huge, covered with thousands and thousands and thousands of baby names. And they just rotated on and on. We couldn't even fit them all on. And I watched as parents walked in crying, pointing out their baby's name. Some said, I've never even said my child's name out loud, let alone seen it written. Like, it was powerful. It was powerful. And, that was a month after Emma's death. And I didn't even realize at that point I would do anything more than that, to help other people. But here we are. I never wanted to write a book. I got out of news. I'm like, people are like, what are you doing? I'm like, I have no idea. I have no idea. I just know that I'm trying to say yes. And that's another thing that happens is like, when I came home and told my husband about that vision of controlled burn and how I'm feeling called out of news, like, the old him would have been like, you're crazy. You need to get back to work. Like, no way.
Right.
And instead he was just like, do it. And I was like, okay, we were different people. And that's what happens. Yeah. Like, you learn that you can trust God in anything. And when he calls you out, you can go. And so that's what I did. I got out of news. I, didn't want to write a book, but doors just flung open wide. And so, here we are.
Yeah. Oh, I got chills when you're talking about that. And what touched me and what's sitting on my heart, we get all this debate around the importance of life and everything else. And even though Emma lived 21 minutes, she touched a lot of people. Touched a lot of people.
Yeah. That's what I told her when I was holding her, you know.
Yeah.
I just told her that a lot of people loved her. And it's true, you know, like God doesn't waste a life, whether that's in the womb or outside of it. And I have such empathy for everyone who's made other decisions. So, you know, I never come at it in a preaching way, but man,
No.
there's a scripture that says, you know, before I formed you in the womb, I knew you. And like, I just think, man, that's all I need. You know, like that's all I need.
Yeah.
To understand the value of life. And so, yeah, just really grateful for her. So grateful for her. Still grieve. You know, obviously we celebrate her birthday. You know, I miss her, but I'll be with her soon. Yeah.
Have you dug into the archives of past Knockin' Doors Down podcast episodes? The Knockin' Doors Down podcast archive is available to you for free. Check it out. Here's a snippet from when Charlie Sheen was on the podcast.
I think shame and people pleasing are completely interwoven.
Absolutely. I agree 100% because I know I greatly struggled with that. Still do at times.
Right. And what is shame really? It's us writing a story about how someone's going to interpret or judge us with us having no idea what the outcome of the next moment is.
This episode and so many more in the Knockin' Doors Down archive. And while you're at it, hit that subscribe button, give this video a thumb up, leave a comment, and share with somebody else that you know will get value out of the Knockin' Doors Down podcast.
So when's the point we decide, hey, I've got this title, I've got the control burn, or when is it like, all right, we need to put pen to paper?
Well, you know, initially I thought I'm used to camera stuff, right? So I thought I'll just record a video curriculum because that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to help teach people like how to literally walk through fire. I mean, not literally, but literally walk through trial. And so I was kind of creating this curriculum and I mean, it's a crazy story how this all happened, but I'll give you a snapshot because it's just cool. Like this is how, like when God calls you out of something, he's so faithful. And this is just testament to that. But I was asked to give a prayer at the governor's prayer breakfast here at the State House in Indiana. This was years ago. And I do a short prayer, like nothing spectacular. And I'm walking out, and this woman comes up to me and she says, "Hey, do you have a literary agent?" And I didn't even know what that was. And so I was like, "No." And she hands me her card and she says, "Hey, my friend is one if you ever need one." And I was like, okay, like, thanks, you know, like put it in my purse, lose it, like, don't even care about it. That month, I happened to be sitting at a dinner with a bigwig in publishing. And he's, you know, and he's like, "Tell me your story," like out of nowhere. And, you know, I'm telling my story and he goes, looks at me, he goes, "You need to get a literary agent." And I was like, I've heard that before. Like, and so I was like, I wonder if I can find that business card. I end up digging this business card out of like the bottom of an old purse. And long story short, I end up on a Zoom call with the #1 literary agent in the country. She's in Austin. And had no idea what I was doing. She gets on, she's like, "I'm not accepting new clients, but I'm kind of doing this as a favor to my friend," right? And I was like, well, that's good because I don't want to be a client. And we end up talking for an hour. And at the end of our conversation, she's like, "Controlled burn needs to be told. I'm sending you a contract." And I'm just like, you know, I get off the Zoom with her and I just kind of throw my head back and I start laughing because I'm like, man, like, God, are you really this fun? You know what I mean? Like, are you really like this involved? And the answer is yes, you know? And so anyway, that started a process. I wrote this book in 4 months. It was crazy. But it was hard too, because you'll appreciate this being in radio. My whole career, 15 years in news, I'm trained to take a complex story and get it down to 30 seconds, right? Like details are the enemy, like get the
Mm-hmm.
nuts and bolts, all this kind of stuff. So that's how I write. And I sit at my computer that first day and I am paralyzed because I'm like, words? Like so many words. I need to write so many words and
Oh,
details and all this kind of stuff. So that was actually
oh,
the hardest part of writing, but it was enjoyable.
oh. I can only imagine. You know what? And it's funny you mentioned that. I've never shared this here. Is, primarily in radio, and I did eventually get to doing a morning show, #1 morning show, by the way, in the Central Valley.
Hey, there you
Um,
go.
yeah.
Toot
Oh,
that horn.
I wanted to be Howard Stern. Listen, like when I found tapes, I tell you, Brooke, it is so far from the man that I am now. Like, I
I love
remember
it.
one time my grandma, who's very much involved with her church in a little town near here, and she calls me one morning and goes, you might have to clean it up a little bit. And I'm like, well, were you listening, Grandma? And she goes, yeah, I had it on in all my Bible study group there. And she's like,
No.
these ladies were appalled. And they go, why are you listening to this? She goes, that's my grandson, and he's #1, and I'm proud of him. And it was like, okay. But the irony
Yes.
the irony of it was, in college I went for film and television. Radio was a fluke. I was telling jokes at a bar and a guy comes up and goes, you want to intern? And I'm like, you want to buy me a Jack and Coke? Long before my alcoholism started. And gosh, I haven't thought about this, but
I love
there was a
that.
TV class, and nobody else in this class, like, we had to produce PSA shows. They were 30 minutes long, and nobody else wanted to do this. And they're just like, you're the minor acting minor, you do this. I'm like, okay. First one is this guy for the Watershed Institute in Monterey, California. Sweet guy. Once the cameras went on, I know you've encountered these people. It was very much like
Oh yeah.
this
Deer
scene
in
from,
headlights.
yeah, Talladega Nights. Where do I put my hands? And somehow a thing clicked on. Was he shared this thing about how his son liked to go see his job. So it was about 2 minutes in, and I got that thing, and all of a sudden this guy was lit up and he was going. And my teacher went, someday, and it's ironic because he sent me a text maybe 4 years ago when this started out, and he goes, see, I told you you'd be good at that. And I was like, huh, the weird things, right? The
Oh,
weird
totally.
things.
Oh, I love that. I love that. I mean, that's what it is, and that's what I always loved about the job too, is like getting to what made people light up, because
Mm,
there's something for everyone,
mm.
and you find it, and yeah, it's a fun moment, and just telling people stories. I mean, it's a honor, right? Like it's really an honor. So yeah, I loved my days in news. It was fun.
Was it an easy transition? A lot of people ask me because I know leaving a job, and that can be a hard thing for a lot of people because we get our identity tied
Oh,
to it. And people always ask me, was it hard? And I go, I miss the people I worked with, but otherwise, no. Like God presented something to me before I acknowledged that's what He was doing in my life.
yeah. Totally. I feel the same exact way. Miss the people, don't miss the job at all, which is surprising because I did love my job. So I am often kind of like surprised that I don't miss it. But I think you're right. When God is in control and kind of directing it, there's going to be a reason why you don't miss something, because you're in his will. You're doing, what he's planned. So I take it as a confirmation that I'm where I'm supposed to be. But the transition was harder than I expected. I never would have said like I got my identity from my career, but man, it's sneaky. And so when I got out, I realized I had built up a lot of layers. I had accumulated a lot of layers that needed to be unpeeled. Just like I mean, I almost like midlife crisis questions, like who am I?
Sure.
Like what do I really like? Like, because you have so many people, influencing how you dress and how you talk and how you do this and that and ask questions that without even knowing it, you become a persona. And, you get used to being stopped, at the grocery store and, I didn't think much of it until it's taken away. And then you're like, oh, okay. Like, but who am I? Who am I without this? And so it was honestly probably a year process of doing a lot of nothing. And as soon as I got out of news, like I created a website and I was like, okay, I'm going to get this curriculum going. I'm going to, we're achievers. We're like, yeah, we'll make this happen. And I was surprised that I just felt like God was like, I need nothing from you. Like, I need nothing from you. I need you to learn how to just be and be you and rest. Rest in my love, rest in who I am, get to know me. And so I did a 9-month discipleship class, intense, read through the Bible in 3 months. I just did a lot of nothing. And it got me to a point, this is just hilarious, but it got me to a point where I wanted none of it. I didn't want the spotlight. I didn't want recognition. I didn't want social media following. I didn't want it. And I mean that. I didn't want any of it. And when I got to that point, guess what? That's when I get the call from, about the literary agent. And that's when God was like, okay, now I can use you. You know what I mean? Now I can lay purpose on you.
Sometimes I don't want it now.
I know. I don't either.
But that's, I guess, not how it works, right? That's not his will and way, Sometimes I don't want to, I don't want to participate in this, but
right.
Hey.
Yeah. Well, it's the stewardship piece. And that was another thing that I had to realize, is that when God hands us something, he expects us to steward it. There's that parable of the talents, and 3 different servants are given different money, and 2 of them kind of make theirs grow. And the third buries his money, and thinking the master, when he comes back, is going to be happy with him for burying it. And the master is just really pissed, and he's scolding him and stuff. And it's a whole illustration of what we are given here on earth. God takes it seriously. He expects us to steward it. And so in my wrestle of God, I just want to go buy 20 acres and homestead, he kind of, lovingly was showing me and convicting me that no, I've given you certain things, and I want you to use them to help others. It's a lot easier to go dig a hole, Brooke, but I need you to help. And so I had to come around to that too at some point. But
yeah, well, and
still am.
Yeah, it's always going to be that work, right? That process thereof. And I used to be so angry at that, and now the way I put it, I was talking with this gentleman who's a mentor of mine, very he's been on A&E's intervention, very prominent interventionist, and we were talking, somehow we came across the the carrot and the stick in life, and the reality that there really is no carrot, there's just a stick. It's just a continual move, because we are meant to move, and we are meant to fight our nature. Like you said, God gave you a clear message: rest for this time. But I'm preparing you again to get stronger, then to continue the journey. I mean, it's just a part of it. Sometimes we do have a season of rest. We do have a season of reflection, but no matter what, we're meant to go until we can't go anymore.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I mean,
and the rest is purposeful too. It's not,
sure.
It serves a really incredible purpose, and we need that as well. But we can't just stay there.
No. Like today, my schedule's been crazy, so I was working till about 1:30 this morning as of our recording, and then I had a recording this morning, and as of our recording, it's this afternoon here. And I was like, I'm going to give myself a little bit of a gap. Oh, yeah, I got to run my son around to his college class and do this stuff. He's in high school, achieving great things. And then my mentor that I just talk about calls. And during that time, I'm like, I'm going to get a break. We actually flushed out a story that we're working on, a short script for a short movie. We like fleshed out the story. It's
Wow.
like there is no rest. It's
Wow.
like, and yeah, and it's just the happenstance of life, right?
Yeah.
That, like, again, when we think, oh, this is how I'd like it to go, it's like, well, I'm laughing at you. That's not how it's going to go.
Yeah. Yeah. But yeah, I think it's such a great example because that happens so much. And I have found that if I am not intentional, like literally scheduling out time to rest, it won't happen. I mean, I have 2 young kids, like it just won't happen. And then what happens, I think, is we get really used to operating on our own strength. And it's like, when you think about Jesus's life, he was doing all this incredible ministry, right? Teaching and speaking to thousands and healing the sick and yada, yada. And you always see time and time again, he left to be alone with the Father, right? Like always, that was his MO. And so it was like, that's what we need to do too. Like we need to make sure we are leaving to spend some time with our Father, because our strength is only so strong, and we'll get to the end of it pretty quickly, unless we're continually getting refilled with the Holy Spirit.
Yeah. Oh no. I tried to live by my own will for a long time. And
How'd that go?
Yeah. Handcuffs, one time, crash car, divorce. Yeah. You name it. All that. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, DTs for days on end, all the good stuff that comes
all the
along
good
with
stuff.
it. So, you mentioned 2 kids. So after Emma's passing, you folks had another baby. Then, like, what was there like a deep conversation about this? Can we do this again? I mean, what a beautiful thing as a couple to decide, no, our family's not done.
Yeah, no, there wasn't a ton of conversation. I think we just knew we weren't done, and that we couldn't let her death be the final say of things, and so we did. We got pregnant, and we had another daughter about a year and a half later, and her name is Marlowe. Her name means storyteller, and I'll be honest, that pregnancy was different, much different from my first, in that it was hard for me to emotionally connect. Like, wow. I mean, obviously I loved her, but it was this feeling that, I think anyone who's been through any kind of trauma or whatever, it's like, oh, is this going to happen again? I don't want to go there again if this is something bad's going to happen. And so it did take me longer to get there emotionally. It was almost as if like I couldn't believe that the goodness of it all, the redemption of it all. Like, really? Like, I remember when we found out the gender, I was like, there's no way this is going to be a girl. Like, there's no way that it would be this beautiful. And it was. And I always say, like redemption isn't replacing what was lost. It really isn't. It's redemption is knowing God. That is the redemption of any of life's fires. But when what was lost is replaced, it's just incredibly sweet, and we don't take it for granted. And so Marlowe is now 4 and Max is 8, and and they know that they have another sibling in heaven, and we talk about her a lot. So
I love it. That's what fun ages. That's
yeah.
Like the best.
Oh gosh. Yeah, it's fun and a handful and tiring. I feel like I'm too old for it, but
yeah, mine are 13 months apart. So when they were little, it was but it was a joy.
Oh boy.
Like I miss it, And
do you have 2 boys?
Son and daughter.
Son and daughter. Okay.
Yeah, oldest is my son, and it's funny. I was talking about with someone too, and about that importance of being present and doing what you can to remain present. And I still struggle with it. I always will. And I can say, oh, it's the ADHD and the dyslexia I have, and or whatever. whatever it is, and it dawned on me, gosh, it's maybe like 6 months ago, Brooke, where I was like, oh my gosh, I don't remember the last time my daughter asked me to push her on the swing, but that time is gone.
Wow. Oh,
You know what I'm saying? So
uh,
so it's that embracing of the things where it's like, oh, we've been out here for 45 minutes. It's like now where I'm at in life is like, man, you had 45 minutes.
yes. I
And
need to hear that. I need to hear that. It's so real because you get into the day to day and it's like, Mom, will you play with this? I don't have time. Like, I don't have time. I don't have time. It's like, how often do I say that? It's like, man, that's such a good reminder.
yeah, because in essence, I guess really all we do have is time.
Right.
Yeah.
Truly.
Yeah.
Oof. Now you're preaching.
All right, here I go. Brooke, all we have is time, my sister. Come on. And I guess that's just the blessings for me that have come is that realization that all I have is time.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, I slept, I don't know, 5 hours last night. Oh, well.
Yeah.
I'm going to go to an eternal resting place, and I sure hope I'm welcome.
Yeah.
I believe I'm doing God's work to be welcome when that time comes, and I don't know when that is. And so I try to revert back to that as quick as possible.
Yeah. You know what was one of the biggest revelations for me about time was when I realized that one day, we will spend eternity with Jesus. And, the Bible tells us that all will be right. There will be no more tears, no more sadness. It's an incredible reality, right, for the believer. But what I realized that was transformative for me was that means that right now, this tiny blip of time that we have on this earth, this is our only chance to relate to Jesus in his suffering. Because when we're in heaven, we won't know about that. And so it's like, this is it. Like, this is our chance to know him in his suffering. And his suffering was profound. Yeah. And in my book, I write about the Via Dolorosa, the walk to the cross, and his interaction with the man who was called to carry his cross. And oh my goodness, it is like, if we can go there with him, if we can allow ourselves to be vulnerable and open enough to share with Jesus our heartache, he comes so close. And it's like, wow, we're not going to have that shot like after this life. Like, this is it. And so instead of like viewing our suffering as something we have to just like survive or succumb to or numb, if we view it as an opportunity to really know him in a way like that, it will change you forever. It'll change you forever. But our time is short. It's real short.
Yeah. I think the thing that, and my girlfriend's just extraordinary, and she was, schooling me, and I don't mean that in like a derogatory, like she schooled me, like, she was showing me something and started to read on it, about when God turned away from Jesus and and his asking of why have you forsaken me? And, that to me was still one of the most powerful things that I return back to. There will be those times of darkness, and then we may not understand why, but the fact that we were given the message of why, and why then that changed. I mean, it's the middle of the day and it went dark. Like, that doesn't usually happen.
Yes.
There's just so much profound wisdom and experience that, God, I don't even have the words I'm looking for right now, Brooke.
Yeah. Yeah, it's exactly what you said. That conversation is so powerful, and it's our example. It's our example, because Jesus is literally like just broken down, sobbing. He knows what's coming.
Yeah.
And he's saying, like, Dad, take this away from me. Like, I know you can do it. Like, take it away. And then he says, but not my will, but yours be done. And that's like, that's us. Like, that's where we can just take his example and go, oh God, like, take this away from me. Like, he wants us to bring him our heartache, our, our desires, what we want. But then ultimately, but it's not about me. It's not about me. And that's how I actually start my book, is like with this foundational truth about what is this life really even about? Because we can't really touch on suffering until we understand what this is. What is our bedrock here? And ultimately, it's that this life isn't about us. It's about him. Doesn't mean he doesn't love us unconditionally and fiercely. He does. But, you have to really lay some firm foundation of truth if you're gonna be able to make it through the fire. And there were times when I was writing that I was like, ooh, this feels hard. Like, this feel like, in suffering, don't people just need a hug? Like, this really, ugh, no one's gonna read this. And time again, I just felt God saying, truth will lead to the ultimate comfort. And we don't like ultimate truth these days. It feels harsh and it feels scary and it feels a little like offensive to our human selves. And it's like, yeah, I get that, but truth is truth. And you really need it underneath of you if you're going to make it through the fire.
Yeah. And I wholeheartedly agree with you. And I'm not rejecting when people say, this is my truth. I know my truth, but that's good and well. And I understand that. But there is also the truth. There are foundational truths that are they're evident throughout time.
And thank God there are. I mean, like really, where would we be if there was no truth? I mean, the world would be in absolute chaos. We need truth.
We're a little bit there, Brooke. Well, I could talk to you forever. We're going to get to some random questions. I'm going to ask you for the final thoughts. But if people want to connect with you, what's the easiest way? We'll put a link in the podcast for the book. Amazon preferred link for the book?
Sure. Yep. Amazon, anywhere books are sold is great. And yeah, you can connect with me, social media, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, or my website is morewithbrookemartin.com. You can also connect with me there.
Awesome. And so what are some of the things that you're doing, otherwise being out, speaking, helping people, what are all of Brooke's offerings? What is your purpose now? What is the word I'm looking for? That's not the word I'm looking. Yeah, we'll go purpose.
Sure. Yeah, I don't know. That's a good question. If you could help me figure that out, that'd be great. No, I am doing some speaking. I've honestly just been all in on this book for the past year, just getting that to print. But I do speaking. I'm going to be looking into offering some rest retreats, actually, as we were talking about resting. So yeah, a little bit of everything, and mostly just homeschooling and being a wife and mother too. So that takes up most of my time. But yeah, I would love to connect, and if you even just want to chat about anything, loss that you've been going through or whatever, just know that I'm here.
Oh, yeah. I was, what servitude, that was the word I was looking for.
Servitude. Oh, that sounds, that sounds very holy. Thank you.
Well, it is. I mean, at the end of the day, it was funny. I was talking to my oldest today about something, and I make a living now off of the things that I find purpose in. And it was a mentor of mine who said, there's nothing wrong with getting paid for what you're good at. And I'm like, well, but this is serving others. And he goes, so's the person that hands you your burger and fries.
Right.
And I'm like,
right.
Oh,
that
okay.
Man, I need to hear that too, because I've been wrestling with that since getting out of news as well. It's like, it feels hard when you are serving people, but that's a good word. That's a good word.
Yeah. I think so. All right, random questions for you here.
All right.
As if you have time, being your busy mom, wife, and doing all that you do. But do you have a hobby or interest people would be surprised to learn about?
Surprised to learn about.
Maybe you don't talk about frequently.
No, I mean, my hobby is probably interior design, which is not like super fun or anything, but I actually visited all of my colleges for interior design and at the very last minute switched over to broadcasting. So that's a fun fact that a lot of people don't know.
Ah, I like that. No, that's pretty cool. And it's a knack I don't have, so I find it
really?
I'm a minimalist.
That's a style. That's a style. Minimalism.
It's the only way I can prevent not being incredibly disorganized.
There you go. And it's smart too. It's really smart.
Oh yeah. If things get put away in drawers and everything else, it's not good. Like I had that. I didn't even remember that.
Yeah. So. Where did that go? I have no idea.
Right. Is there a book that you've read recently or a TV show or movie that you've watched that you had a big takeaway from that you would want to share?
Oh my gosh, yes. In fact, I'm not even done with it yet, but I'm reading this book called Imagine the God of Heaven. And it's written by this man named John Burke. Real quick snapshot. He was agnostic for most of his life, an engineer. And then his dad was dying of cancer. And he kind of went on this quest to prove that there's no afterlife or something like that was the context. Anyway, got a hold of some research papers about near-death experiences, people who clinically died but came back to life. Long story short, this led him on his life's journey. To date, he has personally interviewed over 9,000 people who have clinically died and come back. These are people from all different walks of life, religions, the world, all over. So it's not just like the Christians or anything. And he records their experiences in heaven. And obviously they come back, but it is fascinating. The similarities between people with no other commonalities, their experiences are fascinating. And if anyone's interested in it, oh my goodness, it has wrecked me. It has reshaped my faith. It is awesome. So it's called Imagine the God of Heaven.
I'm going to have to check that out. And I do think
you need to.
I think the pastor at my church has mentioned him before.
So
I don't know what you called it in TV, but for us, it was like our in and outs of breaks.
Okay. Transitions or?
Yeah. Like your transition. So do you still have the capability to do one? Do you remember any of them?
I have no idea. It's been so long.
Oh, I'm challenging because I can still do it. I know, but radio's a little bit different. So
radio's different. What do you mean? What do you mean? Like, give me an example.
So maybe if it was, how it'll come in, hi, Brooke Martin with the evening news. We're going to be talking this story, but the top story of the evening, is it still in there?
I don't know. I could make something up, but you give me a teleprompter, you better believe I could still do it.
I'm sure. See, I'm dyslexic. I had to get good at memorizing, so teleprompters.
Yeah, you guys you freestyle in radio. TV is different, but I could go with a teleprompter all day.
You could go with all right. I feel like I should have created some teleprompter to challenge.
Yes, please. Well, it's funny because with doing speaking, everyone assumes that I love to do public speaking, but I don't. That's another little kind of fun fact. It's really taken me a while to get over some major anxiety around it because I can talk to a camera all day long. But people are different. And so I've had to really kind of work at it and kind of will myself to do it. But I now enjoy it and I feel like it's really fruitful. But yeah, people just assume, oh, you must love to do that. I'm like, nope, I don't.
But it's what you're called to do. And I was going to my next question was if you're an introvert or extrovert.
I am an extroverted introvert. So does that make sense? Like,
Yes, that's me.
I light up around people. I love talking to people, but it exhausts me. So like love it, but then I need my downtime, quiet time, alone time. It doesn't fill me up like it does for extroverts.
Yeah, I recently I do all kinds of different event stuff, and I did a MMA ring announcing for an MMA event and
Oh,
afterwards.
that's cool.
Yeah, it's actually the gentleman I started the podcast with because the podcast is named after his book. Yeah,
Okay.
Carlos Fieri had a very
Yeah.
bad cocaine addiction, and yeah. So, anyways, it's for his company that he does it, and he's like, "Man, you look like worn out afterwards." I'm like, "Cause I am." Like I don't. The crowd could cheer crazy and be like,
Yeah.
"You're the best announcer ever," and I will get no energy from that.
Yeah.
It is just
Yeah.
energy out, none back in.
Yeah. It's like you can rise to the occasion, but then it just sucks the life out of you and the energy out of you. Yeah. I
Mhm.
can relate to that totally.
All right, let's go two more. Do you have a favorite fictional character?
Hmm.
I put Disney here, but I'm gonna go just fictional in general. Not a lot of people. Some people I've had people like I don't like Disney, so I just go okay.
Yeah. Probably fictional character. I don't even know. I don't remember his name, but do you remember 300, the movie
Mm,
300, Gerard Butler? I loved his character. Do you know
yes.
what movie
Oh
I'm
yeah.
talking about?
Yeah. Yeah. Of course.
I just when I think of like favorite, like I just love like heroes, Braveheart, 300, like all of those kind of like warrior type spirits. That's probably who I love. Now, if we're going Disney, it's totally Beauty and the Beast, 100% Belle, but yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Same. Same. Yeah. I have actually it's a artist. It's one of the reprints of Belle from the stage play in a really nice frame. That yeah.
Are you
So
serious?
oh yeah, I'm a Disney nut. Like
Oh my
yeah.
gosh, I
I,
love that.
Yeah, the princess is she's my favorite by far. So I'm
Oh,
with you
yes,
on that.
totally. Yes.
If there's anything that you would want to lend through your life experience, your knowledge, your faith, to maybe anyone that is going through that suffering period or has a loved one that is, what would you want to share?
Hmm. I talk about these species of flowers that are called fire followers.
Mm.
And they are a real species of flowers, and their seeds are impenetrable. They do not open from rainfall or sunlight or any of the normal rhythms of existence. The only thing that unlocks them is the searing heat shock of fire. And so after a fire burns through, when the landscape is black and it seems hopeless and helpless, you'll start to see these colorful flowers sprout around charred stubs and branches. And I believe that inside each of us are fire followers. There are these seeds of revelation and truth and faith that sometimes stay locked away for decades, our whole lives. And sometimes it takes the heat of life's fires to unlock them. And you said the word awaken. And I just, want to tell anyone who is in it right now, in the pain, in the suffering, in the tragedy, to say, let hope arise. There is so much that God has for you in and through it. He will redeem your pain if you surrender it to him. And I just think of Paul when he's writing in Philippians, he's in prison. I mean, he suffered just about as much as anyone. And he writes this, I think it's Philippians 1, but he writes to the church and he says, "So I rejoice because I know that through your prayers and through the work of the Holy Spirit, this is going to turn out for my deliverance, as it is my eager expectation and hope that I will not at all be ashamed, but with hope, honor that Jesus will be honored in my body, whether through life or death." And that scripture just says to me, like, man, there is so much more for us in suffering if we can have the perspective to see it and the surrender to give it over to Jesus. He will not waste a pain. In fact, I was interviewing a mother dying of ALS during my career, and it was so gut-wrenching. Her young kids were crawling around, and she was near death, and she was in her wheelchair, and she couldn't speak because the disease had taken away most of her ability to speak. So her husband was interpreting most of the time. But at the very end, she leans forward in her wheelchair, and with every ounce of energy she had left in her, she looks at me and she raises her shaky finger and she said, "God will not waste a hurt." And that's true. She has since passed, and I know that her words resonate and are true, and God will not, he will not waste a hurt, but it's up to us whether to surrender to him. And so he is the way, the truth, and the life. I just say Jesus is the answer.
Boy, you got me there. I got chills going up and down both arms. And the book I'm ordering, Controlled Burn, Rising from the Ashes to Forge an Unshakable Faith. Brooke Martin, thank you so much. This has been an honor and a pleasure.
Yeah, thanks, Jason. It's been fun. Thanks so much.
Absolutely. And on that note, remember, no outside solutions to inside problems, and keep knocking doors down.
Knocking doors.